Today's guest took a massive risk on bourbon before bourbon was cool. He started Jefferson's Bourbon in the late 90s when the category was in decline and spent years scraping by, and still doubled down on crazy ideas like aging barrels at sea and sending bourbon to exotic locations like Singapore just to see how the climate would change the flavor. We're talking family history, ocean-aged whiskey, the tropics, massive risk, and what it really takes to stick with a dream for 14 years before it finally pays off. Welcome to the Manual Channel. My name is Dan Gall. So let's pour a glass and jump into the journey, the conversation with Jefferson's Bourbon founder, Trey Zoeller. Let's go. Trey, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate your time in joining us.
Dan, happy to be here. It's Repeal Day. We're going to have a little fun.
Yes, we are. We got 3 expressions we're going to go through, and I can't wait to get to them. But I do want to ask a few questions about just the start of how you got to Jefferson's and where it's based off of the name, the history of that. Can you go through that real quick for me?
Absolutely. So Zoeller is not a very easy name to pronounce or remember. So I thought it best not to call it Zoeller's Reserve initially. When I started in 1997, there were only 8 distilleries. Everything was about heritage and tradition. And for an American spirit that I knew we would have to be innovative to separate ourselves from those 8 distilleries that were already in play, I wanted to name it out after our American president, Thomas Jefferson, who embodies America. He very much was in support of the bourbon industry. He repealed the whiskey tax. He made sure barrels were out on all expedition and stills out at all forts. And again, who's more innovative in American history than Thomas Jefferson? So I thought that was a natural fit for us.
When you started, you were working with others first, and now, like, at what point were you like, we're going to start distilling our own, create our own mash, like, and recipe and everything else?
So how I started, and that's the only way I could have gotten into the business. We certainly didn't have the money to build a distillery and start putting down a lot of stock. I was able to buy just enough to bottle and then buy the next tranche. And then slowly but surely, I started building up stocks that way. About 3 years into it, I did start contract distilling with one of the big distillers in Kentucky. So they were making my recipe and put it into our barrels for us. So first sourcing, then contract distilling. And it was 14 years before we started distilling ourselves. So, it took quite a while for us to be able to have the means to be able to have the capital costs to build a distillery.
Yeah, 14 years is a long time, and that's a lot of commitment and effort there to, I mean, it's not easy, right? Like, if it took you 14 years to get to that point, there must have been a lot of trials and tribulations and challenges and probably questions of whether you want to continue doing it or not. Did that occur?
Absolutely. I think I pocketed $15,000 the first year. It was certainly not a moneymaker. Back in the day, this was so long ago, we would get our orders from our distributors off the fax machine on that thermal paper that would roll up and fall off. And from the time that the Kentucky Derby would run, the first Saturday in May, until college football kicked off, I mean, it was collecting dust. There were no orders coming at all. It was very seasonal at that time. So I started doing other things. I created energy drinks. I created fortified waters, some wine, some beers, which were much more profitable than Jefferson's was at the time. But that's where my passion played, and that's why I stuck with it. I mean, I've told people a number of times about this story. Julian Van Winkle and I went to the first whiskey fest together. We were kind of stuck in the corner because everybody was there because of Scotch whiskey. And we had a deal, buy 5 cases of Pappy Van Winkle, get a case of Jefferson's Reserve, no charge. Buy 5 cases of Jefferson's Reserve and get a case of Pappy, no charge. And we couldn't give it away.
Wow. So back then, because I know there was like kind of like a brown exodus for a while, and it went over to Japan and was very popular in Japan and kind of died off in the US. And
Right?
then popularity started coming back. Um, so I feel
It hadn't hit yet. Not when I
like
started. Not,
yeah.
I think the first Whiskey Fest was in '99. Hadn't hit yet. 90% of the people there were there for scotch, and
Okay.
we were a bunch of old white men. Right. It is totally changed. So I wouldn't say 90% go to the Whiskey Fest now for bourbon, but it's 80%,
I didn't
and
even know
very
they had
diversified.
scotch. I
Excuse
didn't
me.
know they had scotch at Whiskey Fest. Like that's a new concept to me.
Well, that's where it started. So it was actually the Malt Advocate that put together the Whiskey Fest before they changed their name to the Whiskey Advocate. And that didn't happen, and I think until Marvin Shankin bought it. So it was the Malt Advocate and the Whiskey Fest. It was all centered around Scotch whiskey. Us bourbon guys would get together afterwards. As I said, we were the redheaded stepchild stuck in the corner, and we were twiddling our thumbs. And literally, if it wasn't for the Hasidic Jews of Williamsburg that found Jefferson's on that first Whiskey Fest, I never would have made it.
Oh wow.
They found it and fell in love with it, and I started working those stores. The kid, wet behind the ears from Kentucky, I didn't know what Hasidic Jew was, and, they really found Jefferson's before anyone and kept us in business.
And so you were distributing up to New York and the surrounding area as your first distribution area?
No, Kentucky was our first.
Okay.
All in Nashville was our second. Chicago and New York were probably 3rd and 4th,
All right.
and, so we were by '99, we were already distributed in New York.
That's awesome. And that means you're kind of ahead of like when bourbon and whiskey started getting popular again here. I feel like at least in the Portland area, it was like in the 2000s, right? Like at
Right.
some point. Yeah.
Probably 2008 to 2010.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And people started doing like PR, like events, like kind of reintroducing their brands to the consumer and to media and probably bars. I'm assuming as well, right?
You got it. Most people would say it was about that time you had 3 things colliding, which would be the Mad Men effect, making, old fashions, Manhattan School, along with craft cocktails coming back, people dusting off the books, and most of those cocktails were made with bourbon and rye at the time. Also, the economy went south around 2008, so they were looking for value, and bourbon was certainly a value compared to scotch at the time. Um, but if you ask me, smartphones, people could dig into it and geek out over it. They started forming bourbon groups, and that's when things really started to bloom.
Building community and finding your kind and learning and exploring together, right?
You,
Discovery.
you
Yeah.
bet. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
how is the family story and that narrative around your grandmother? So if I is she your grandmother, Marian, or is she like a great
Marian
grandmother?
McLain. She is
Yeah.
my eighth generation grandmother. So I would say I was in the beginning before we found this arrest record. My maternal grandmother, when we went to her house, who we referred to as RNG, Redneck Granny. Redneck Granny was awesome. Her husband died when I was a baby, and she took over. They owned bowling alleys, lived above the bowling alley, and so she took over the bowling alley. But when you went to her house, she didn't ask you what you wanted to drink. Rather, how do you take your bourbon? So, you know, I think she kind of instilled, bourbon from the core to me. But my dad, doing genealogy, as he did back way before it was connected through the internet, found that my eighth generation grandmother on my mom's side in 1799, after her husband was killed in the Revolutionary War, she had 5 kids, and she turned into producing and selling spirits,
Hmm.
making whiskey. And George Washington, who was General Washington, fought a war against the British, became General or President Washington, had to pay for it. He instituted the whiskey tax. She forgot to pay that tax. So she got arrested, and that arrest record makes her the first documented woman in the American whiskey business.
Wow.
So if she would have got caught a little bit later when Thomas Jefferson was in office, it would have been repealed. But so pretty cool history. And I think from what I understand, my family has a long lineage of moonshining, which is certainly not uncommon at all. My dad went on to write a number of bourbon books. Its most popular, Bourbon in Kentucky, which I always said was the most boring book ever written. And he did 5 editions of it. It's really a reference book. He identified over 2,000 distilleries paying taxes in Kentucky. And it would tell you how many bushels of corn they would mill. Yeah, it was very much a reference book. But it did have one interesting chapter in it, and that was how whiskey was taken from the western slope of the Appalachian Mountains, which is where the distillers went after that whiskey tax was imposed. So past the long arm of the tax man. So they started distilling in Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana. And to get it to market, they put it in barrels for the first time. They put a big char through the barrel before they put it in to get the flavor of whatever else was in there. So nails, meat, what have you, out of it. And then floated it down the Ohio River to the Mississippi River, traded for gold. And then typically would walk back, or may just walk off and never take that back. And then the barrels would either get offloaded there or put on ships, sail around Florida back to where there were people, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And the whiskey had transformed so much, and in my mind, transformed into bourbon for the first time, that the demand got bigger and bigger, even though the cost was higher. And the distilleries got bigger and bigger, and that's why it proliferated in Kentucky. So I reenacted that journey for, I think, the first time in over 150 years. And I guarantee you it's the most expensive bourbon ever produced or ever bottled. We tried to do it as historically accurate as possible. So we distilled in January, took off June 7th. So after the spring floods would have subsided, and then floated down the rivers. And it took us 4 boats, one of which got destroyed by Hurricane Matthew. We wintered in Fort Lauderdale and basically hitchhiked up to New York. We landed a year to the date that we took off. And the whiskey that came out of the barrel that we tapped into was as dark as a 16-year-old bourbon that I double barreled for 5 years. It was so complex, so night and day different from the same whiskey distilled and aged in Kentucky. It was incredible.
Do you still have a bottle of that?
I do.
Yeah. Is it on the wall behind you?
It's
Yes. Let's see that. Oh, wow.
Jefferson's
Kentucky aged.
journey. I went on the journey, the one aged in Kentucky.
That's amazing. I love those bottle styles too. It looks like a flask.
Yeah. Nice little flask, and it shows the route that it went on and what happened. And
Those are unopened, right?
correct.
Yeah. You're going to keep those unopened forever?
You
Yeah.
got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
For a long time. Who knows? I may tap into it. I'm going to tap into some pre-prohibition bourbon a little bit later, since it is
Really?
field day. And my dad collected, and I think he had either the largest or second largest pre-prohibition collection in the world. And I think 119 different distilleries represented. So I've got some doubles, and on repeal day, I'll go ahead and break one of those out.
That's amazing. That must be fun just to look at what the bottles and labels look like, let alone
Absolutely.
taste, right?
You bet.
Wow. So what you basically just described is Ocean, right? And the journey or the founding of Ocean. When did you come up with that idea of doing Ocean and planning it and everything?
I think that leads back to your question of what influence did my dad and uncle have on me. I was on a friendship down in Costa Rica, and we were catching sharks, trying to surf, sitting on the bow of the ship, drinking bourbon. And I saw the bourbon rocking back and forth in the bottle. And I thought, if that would happen in the bottle, it would happen in the barrel. That's going to change the maturation. So he was taken on a multi-year journey. I talked him into taking some barrels on a ship. It took off for 3.5 years. What came out 3.5 years later was black in color. It was thick, and it was absolutely delicious. Totally different than any other bourbon that I'd ever had. And that's when I started thinking about it, and I had to commercialize it from there. But I started thinking, when bourbon took off way back when, and people were receiving that bourbon after it went on the journey, I bet it tastes a lot more like Jefferson's Ocean than bourbon that's distilled and aged in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So I thought about it, and then I thought, okay, so why did they stop doing it? It was very expensive, it was very dangerous, and it was very limited on how much you could take. And when did they stop? Well, they stopped when the railroad came to Kentucky. So instead of going on that dangerous, expensive journey, they could ship whiskey to New York in 2 weeks. I don't know if you've ever had 2-week-old whiskey. It sucks. So what did they do? They did what was practical. They built warehouses right next to the distillery and stacked it high rather than wide because it's cheaper, and aged it year over year over year over year over year over year, trying to catch up to the maturation that happened on that journey. So I was like, okay, we did this because that's what's practical. Now, let's throw practicality out the door, and let's do what we think is going to enhance it and make it the best. So typically what I do, and as we talked about, I've got over 40 different expressions of Jefferson's. If we did 40, 37 of which we do more than just distill it, age it, cut it to proof, and bottle it. We're putting more time, money, and effort typically into the maturation process. So through blending, where we started, and that's really kind of what I am more than anything, is a blender and a tinkerer. And that's still the most difficult products to put together, because you can only do it one way, and that's by tasting it, eat from batch to batch to batch. Or finishing or changing the agitation or the environment and climate to bring different flavors.
Are
So
you still doing that today? Are you still thinking about this and involved on a day-to-day basis around
um,
planning and being creative around that?
you bet. You bet. Yeah, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's where I have the most fun. And I would say I don't do it in a boardroom. It's typically collaborating with somebody. And that typically comes from having drinks with somebody and having conversations. And the conversation just evolves, and we fall into trying to experiment with some barrels and see what will happen.
Yeah, get those creative juices going literally by having a few drinks and having fun and just letting the conversation go.
You got it. That's it.
So okay, so if Oceans was your first, or was it your first? Was that
No,
your first?
no.
Okay.
Ocean was probably our 5th or 6th product.
Okay. So was Oceans the most unique and uh complex? Because I mean, those bottles are going all over the place. Like you look at the journey on the sites of, and they're the same journey out of every single expression, right? Of Oceans.
We've done 35 voyages now, all except for the first voyage that I just mentioned, and voyage 24, which occurred during COVID, which a lot of the ports today we age it for 6 years in Kentucky, shoot it down to Savannah, Georgia in shipping containers, where it's contracted to be on the very top of the bow of the ship. We cut sunroofs in the top, and then it heads out of Savannah, goes through the Panama Canal. It's in ports along the way. It's New Zealand, around Australia and the Tasmanian Sea, all the way up Singapore, Korea, Japan, shoots back across the Pacific to Vancouver, down the west coast of the US, Mexico, back through the Panama Canal, up the east coast to Maine, shoots over. It's a couple places in the North Sea in Europe, back to Maine, back to Savannah, back to Kentucky.
That's an amazing vacation.
So, it's very well traveled.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that is a complex thing to do. I'm sure even planning wise and everything else. And I know you have tropics now. Can you explain what is the difference between oceans and tropics?
You got it. And I'll tell you, let me go back a little bit. When we first came out with this, so I put the barrels on the ship for the first time in 2008, took it off in 2012. When we first started coming out with that, people were like, hold on a second, this is gimmicky. This, what's this really doing? Um, and then we've broken it down molecularly, and each voyage, you can definitely tell a difference. And I did a podcast not too long ago, and they're like, Trey, today people are buying into different warehouses on a piece of property, make better whiskey. There's not a whole lot, there's not really microclimates in Kentucky. You're either blanketed with heat and humidity or it's cold and wet. It's pretty constant. It's not like the West Coast. But when you take it down to the Tasmanian Sea or to the Sea of Japan or to the North Sea and across the equator, again, all types of different climates. And that truly makes a big difference. So it's not only the rocking, constant contact between liquid to wood that is giving more color and stripping away the astringency or the salt air that's coming through, or the caramelization that occurs when you're crossing the equator. But the wood's opening it up when you're down at the equator and getting really tight. And so it brings different characteristics out. So over the last now 10 years, I've been sprinkling barrels at different locations around the U.S. Found if I send somebody a barrel, they invite me back over and over. So it's some nice properties. But I found that certain climates produce different types of whiskeys.
Mm.
So one I had down in the Delta, and very hot, humid environment, 8 months out of the year. And it accelerated the maturation process and brought different flavors out and more viscosity. So when I thought about the tropics, I thought, what if we sent it someplace and aged it heat, humidity all the time? So I wanted to send it somewhere around the equator. Most places around the equator, if I sent 1,000 barrels there, I wasn't very sure that they would be there when I got back. So I thought Singapore. You can't spit or chew gum, but odds are your barrels will be there when you come back. Singapore's 80 miles from the equator, and it's oppressively hot and humid. So we took 6-year-old bourbon, put it on ships, sent it through the Panama Canal, shipped it across the Pacific to Singapore. We take the barrels off in containers and we leave it in the port for 18 months. And it really is like putting that whiskey on simmer. Kind of slow cooks it for 18 months. And it brings the sappiness out of the wood. So I get big cherry pie flavors out of it, some blood orange. Really totally different than what you would get in Kentucky.
You know what? You are making me like my mouth water right now and kind of thirsty. And I think this is a great time to maybe crack into some of these so that I can experience what you're talking about, because I have been to Singapore and it is super impressive from a heat and humidity standpoint. And it doesn't change, right? Like all year long, because it's right on the equator.
You got it.
I'm excited to try that. But right now I have 3 expressions in front of me. I have Jefferson's bourbon. I have the Marian expression.
McLain.
Yep. And then I have the Tropics. So which one would you recommend we start with?
Let's start with Jefferson's very small batch.
Okay.
I might have that here as well, but in the big bottle.
That's nice. Don't drink that whole thing in this one sitting, or else it'll be really interesting. All right, I got myself some here.
I tell you what, this is one that I'm drinking more and more lately, which is a little bit different. I blend 4 different bourbons together here. And what I'm trying to do is get a very approachable, easy drinking bourbon. One that I call it approachable. My friends call it dangerous. I typically drink all my bourbon on a big rock, and this slides down after that's put on a big rock.
Really?
Yeah, I bet you I've got something interesting for you. You're in Portland, right?
I am.
My guess is you drink bourbon neat.
I do.
Okay. So I was at a friend's birthday not too long ago. He lives in Colorado now. He's from Kentucky. We went to Nashville, like 25 guys. We go to a bourbon bar. Almost everybody ordered a bourbon. Everybody from Kentucky ordered it on the rocks. Everybody from Colorado ordered it neat, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah. I have seen from another interview that you did that you're like, drink bourbon however you like to drink it,
Yeah.
right? And I think part of the things, if you talk to a lot of purists, right, they're always like, you got to drink it neat. You got to drink it neat. I will drink it with ice, especially in the summer, like a big rock. I've done the droppers, right? Like I think it depends on what you're drinking and whether how that water, for me at least, changes or enhances that that
I'll give you
spirit.
that. And I totally agree with that. But it also depends on where you are in your bourbon journey.
Mm-hmm.
So, one, I'll go back to that story I was just saying. I think we in Kentucky drink it on the rocks typically because we grew up drinking it and we put everything on the rocks. Never questioned it. That's just what we did. Got used to. Certainly, you get more flavors drinking it neat, but that's how we started. And then nobody has a cask strength neat pour for the first time and says, "Where the hell's that been my whole life?" You don't do a double flip off the high dive the first time you get into a pool. So
You
got
could
to
try,
wait
but you
it.
might end in a disaster.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. So I tell people, and one reason we have 40 different expressions. Baskin Robbins has 31 flavors for a reason. If I've got 10 people here and we all go to Baskin Robbins, we're probably going to order 7 different types of ice cream. And one's not better than the other. It's just what suits that palate.
Yeah.
And I think the same goes for bourbon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one, as I said, I'm drinking more of this. This is lower proof, 82.3 proof. I tried to make this as easy and approachable as possible. I've been going all week. I was on four planes in 4 days. And so I'm doing bourbon dinners. This is something that I can get to. I had to get up at 6 a.m., 4 a.m. to catch flights the next day. And this is something that just slides down, and really the drinkability, the sessionability of it is fantastic.
Yeah. It's got a good viscosity to it. Some good oil.
It does.
It smells great, right? And it lingers on the tongue for a while. It's a good, yeah.
It holds up, but it really drinks easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
And
got
it's
this
got a little
still
keg
laying
spice
on
to
my
it.
tongue. Excuse me?
Yeah. It's got a little kick and spice to it, but
Mhm.
it's definitely, it lingers, like it's still lingering in my
Yeah.
mouth. My saliva is kicking, like it's a great expression.
So what I do with this one, we have 4 different expressions, one of which is what I call my base bourbon, and it comprises about 65 to 70%, depending on the batch. And then the other 3 can change, age, from mash bill, you name it, barrel spec. But I'm always drinking it next to a control, and I'm trying to get it to as close to that control as possible. However, if I've had something that I like a little bit better than the control for that one, I'll use it for that batch. However, the next batch, I'm going back to that control. So that gives it the consistency, but a little variety as well.
Mm.
And something interesting on that control bourbon, or not the control bourbon, but the base bourbon, is it's aged in a barrel with a smaller char too, which allows a lot of secondary flavors to come out. So I get some nice orange and peach coming out of here, some good citrus as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the second, because the first sip is always the shock, the second kind of like smooths out, and then I'm excited for my third one. But like the difference between that first and the second sip is substantial, and that's where you lose the alcohol burn, and you really start feeling like the spice, the caramels in it, the vanilla at the end, um, and then the smell starts changing too, and that's where I start smelling the wood.
Right?
Mhm. It really gets soft. Um,
It does. It does. That's
yeah.
where, as I said, sessionable.
Yes. That's delicious. So this is the one that you recommend for people maybe their first experience with Jeffersons?
It depends on, again, where are they on their bourbon journey?
Mm, okay.
Um, I got one that with me right here that Whiskey Magazine just gave it the number 6 whiskey, um,
Oh, the cast strength.
the cask strength. It's
Yeah.
130 proof, 8 years old. It's delicious.
I can only imagine. And cast strength for me is like you talk about your journey, right? Most people that are not really into drinking whiskey or bourbon in general, the cast strength is usually a little overpowering and hot for them.
Right?
And then, but people that are experienced and they enjoy going to the cast strength because it opens up a whole nother world of flavor, right? And it's not it's something to enjoy. You get over that first sip pretty quick.
So we aged that for 8 years, dumped it, put it into a tank, and it stayed in a tank for 3 years.
Wow.
Not purposely, we were gonna do something else with it. And I've always been of the belief nothing happens once you dump it out of the wood. I can tell you it tastes different from what we dumped. And I think it's those molecules came together over those 3 years, and it drinks so much lower than 130 proof, comes out with this cola and cherry. When we launched it, the first thing almost all the bourbon writers said about it, it's creamy. For
Mm.
130 proof, you typically don't hear creamy, but creamy cherry cola, it's delicious. So,
Those are all words I like.
yeah. So again, this is a great product right here that is so different than this one right here.
Oh yeah.
And there's different times for different occasions.
So how much are you losing to the angel share out of something that old versus like an ocean's journey
We lose a lot more on the ocean journey.
from the heat and everything? Yeah.
So, and depending on what we encounter on the ocean journey, hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons, we get daily sea conditions, whether it's calm, moderate, rough, or very rough. The more rough seas that we have, the larger the angel share.
Really
And then when we send it to Singapore, we even lose even more in that hot, humid environment.
interesting. So like when you open a barrel, because I know most people have never seen like what a barrel would look like once it's ready, and you guys crack it open. Are you losing like half on?
We have, I think it was Voyage 13, we hit 3 named storms in the North Atlantic, and we lost over half. So over half of it was gone, which made it very condensed, so extra briny. It was very salty. So some people love that voyage because of all the salinity. Some people don't like it as much because of that.
Yeah. I think that's what's so fascinating about oceans, versus like, this one you just showed us is that, every single release is so different from the one before.
Right.
And every barrel, I'm assuming, is also different, right? Like, you could take a barrel from the same release. Like, I know that my local store will get their own, like, specific barrel or whatever like
Yeah,
that.
the
It tastes
single
different.
barrel from the ocean. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're vastly different.
I think that's part of the fun. I mean, it's so amazing 'cause you don't know what you're gonna get versus, like, every time you crack open, one of the other ones, the flavor is always going to be consistent.
I say it's like Christmas morning because when we send those barrels off, we lock those containers and they'll get unlocked until they come back. So you can't check on it along the way. It's when they come back. What we do is we look at the data, look at the different sea and air temperatures as well as the sea conditions, and we take a guess and we start drawing lines on the barrel. Then we start drilling down. The first person to hit liquid, we all put $20 on the barrel head when we do this. One who hits liquid takes the 20, takes the collection of $20.
Yeah.
So it's very different.
So you've been doing the oceans for like 24 years, is that right?
We bottled the first one in 12.
Wow. Okay. So like
14 years.
14. That was bad math. Holy cow. And that totally threw off my questioning on what I was going to say. Never mind. I'll come back to that.
Okay.
Anyways, let's move on to the next one. And which one would you want me to go next? Is it the Marian
Let's do the
McLain?
Marian McLain.
All right. And you know what's cool about this bottle? Is this little leather pamphlet that comes with, I'm going to take it off real quick and open it up. Got this cool fold out with, kind of the history and the descriptor. Yeah. Look at that. That is really cool. What a cool thing to give.
Yeah. It tells the story. And it really is, there's been a lot of great women in the industry, especially early on. And it's a testament to their contribution, but more than anything. So I wanted to blend 5 different bourbons together, 5 very different bourbons together based on her 5 children that she had to support. So we did a 14-year-old, very mint forward bourbon. To counter that out, I did a rum cask bourbon that makes a nice influence. We did a pot stilled 10-year-old that has a nice oily feel to it. I double barreled a wheated bourbon that went into the barrel first time at 125 proof. When I double barreled it, I cut it down to 86 proof. So that gives like a big cinnamon toast crunch flavor out of it. And then we did our 12-year-old base bourbon for our Jefferson's Reserve. And those came together. The hard part when you're doing 5 different ones is to get each one to show their head, to be able to get each one out of there, but still work well together. And I think that this really came together perfectly.
So this is a blend of all 5 of those.
Correct.
Wow. And you know what, that nose is crazy because it's like buttery. Like, and I could smell it. The moment I opened up that bottle, I was like, okay, I can smell this is something a little bit different.
Very different. As soon as you taste this, you're definitely going to get something
that color. Different. Look at that color. Yeah. And what was, obviously Marian's the inspiration around this, but was there a specific reason of blending those 5 together? Was it
when I first did it, I was thinking about 5 different kids and their different personalities. No 2 kids are alike. I've got twins. They could be, they're night and day different. So I wanted to get as different bourbons together as I could and make them kind of work as a family.
Have you guys ever found any old recipes from the family archives?
We have not.
But
I don't think there was anything written down.
Yeah, everything was done in the hills, and they just knew what they were doing. Right?
Yeah. We weren't paying taxes. We weren't on the legal side of it.
That's warm.
It's good.
And again, that first sip, you get that kind of just smack in the face a little bit, and it settles out. Not as oily as the other one. A little bit cleaner and crisper.
But 102 proof.
See, there's a higher proof, but not as hot.
No. No, I think it's so well rounded. People ask me all the time, "Which your favorite have you done for you?" And typically, I say they're like kids. It depends on the day,
Hmm.
but if I've got one option in front of me, this is it.
Yeah. This is just sends your tongue into like this sparkly, magical universe. It's kind of hard to describe the sensation on the tongue other than it's just activated.
There's so much going on with it.
Mhm. But it's sweet
Mhm.
and dark and warm. It's definitely more less vanilla to me. Everybody's a little different, but it's definitely more of the caramel flavors. And it's clean on the tongue for me. There's a little bit of oil, and it's definitely lingering, but it's not coating oily. Like it's just fresh.
Mhm.
I would say smells really good. I could see having a cigar with this. Honestly, to get the
Totally
smoke.
hold up and all those flavors out of a cigar. You bet.
Hmm. Yeah. And then that third sip, and again, it's a totally different profile. You get more of the barrel in that.
And, that's typically there's an evolution out of the glass for sure,
Mhm.
specifically if you put ice on it. But I always say I don't really look for flavors until the third. First one's kinda to wake it up. Second one's to, okay, you're processing it, and third one's like, "Okay, now this is what this is gonna taste like." But I
So
also like that first one that just kinda smacks you.
yeah, yeah. You get punched in the face
Mhm.
on a lot of things, which is good, that awakening of the senses. So this is aged a total of 11 years, is that right?
And now let's see, so and on the front of this, it has 14-year-old, 21% 14-year-old, 40% 11-year-old, 14% with a double barrel, 17% rum cast finish, 8% 8-year-old.
Okay. So there's obviously the blend, but so like, if you were kind of trying to follow a ritual of on that third sip, swishing it in your mouth for how many seconds, what would you recommend?
I would say 3.
3. All right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Let it roll around, and hit everywhere for 3 seconds, and then let it slide down.
And when did you release this? This bottle says batch 1.
So you've got batch 1, which was released 2 years ago. So we've done 2 batches.
Okay. And are you going to continue releasing this or is this going to be limited special edition?
And our goal right now is to, release this every other year and then reintroduce our Jefferson's Presidential Select. So
Oh,
we'll have one go on every other year.
all right. That was delicious. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be the Tropics.
All right.
And I love finished in Singapore. It's got the
You got it. I didn't have the Tropics with me, but I was grabbing it right here.
yeah, take some water after that. I mean, it may not be graceful, so I'm kind of scared to do it, but I could always try to pour a little water into one of these and see what happens.
Yeah, see how it changes.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, if we went to an adult party, almost, it might have been over half, but the cocktail was either a gin and tonic at the time or a bourbon and water.
Mhm.
I haven't heard anybody order a bourbon and water at 20 years.
And how much water is in a bourbon and water?
Well, I can tell you that Booker No would be 50-50
Wow. Really?
and called Kentucky tea. He'd
Ooh,
sit on his porch with 50-50 with ice on it and sip all day.
that sounds like that's like a great name,
It's a
Kentucky
great
Tea.
name, isn't it?
I think you need to bottle that up.
Yeah, you're right. Fred and Freddie might say, "Wait a second, that's Booker's." Uh, but it does, yeah, and even, on a big piece of ice, it evolves from that first sip. Looks like my screen is getting lighter or darker and darker.
It's all that sun you're getting over there, which I'm really jealous of
Oh,
because
man.
it is storming out over here.
We finally had some. We've got snow on the ground here, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Early for Kentucky.
So this is definitely like, a softer nose to it and, more fruit for sure,
So,
fruit
okay,
forward.
you put some water into the tropics. Is that correct?
I haven't put any water into it, but
Okay. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
going from, Marian McLain over
Okay.
to this,
All right.
yeah,
Yes,
less sugar in terms of caramel.
you got it. So, as I said, 6 years in Kentucky, put it on ships, sent it over to Singapore, and it really brings the sappiness of the wood out. So, you're not getting that toothpick or woody. It's, I get a ton of cherry pie with this one.
Mhm.
The
And that
flavors,
first sip, not much of a punch in the face, there's a little bit, but it is way more it's so different than the other 2,
again,
definitely it's there's sweetness there, but it's silky.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
silky. Yeah.
silky. Like, you think of silk just touching your skin, like, it's a
Mhm.
silk touching my tongue right now, like,
It's
very
I love the flavors that came out of this, and it's so different. That's why I love it so much.
Mhm.
Just really, it just pulls things out that you couldn't get here. And, so one of the reasons, when you send 1,000 barrels out, that's a pretty good risk. Like, what the hell's gonna happen if I put it in that environment? And one of the reasons that I had the confidence to do that was Kavalan, which is a Taiwanese malt, which, people are like, "You can't make Scotch style whiskey in Taiwan." And I think the reason they were able to do it and why it was so successful, it's won whiskey of the year a couple times. And I don't think they've ever bottled anything up over 5 years, is because of aging it in that hot, humid environment. Now, one thing bad about most places around the equator is the water sucks.
Uh-huh.
So we send it back across the Pacific to Kentucky and cut it down with Kentucky limestone.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna get the best of both worlds in my mind.
So this is 18 months in the port in Singapore. How long does it take to get there and back?
About 60 days.
Okay, not too bad then.
Mhm,
And it's aged before you send it out, you said 6 years? Is
mhm.
that right?
Try
Yeah, so, okay. This has got good age to it still,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. You know, what I wanted to do is kinda push the boundaries and definition of what bourbon is without bastardizing it. So, typically, we're starting with 6 to 8-year-old bourbon and then manipulating it one way or the other. So, it's already got good maturity on it, but it's not taking so much that whatever we do to it, I want that to be the main driver. This sitting in Singapore, I want that to be the dominant flavor that comes through. Yeah. Our
It's definitely
oceans, I want that to be the main flavor that comes through. This
yeah.
is actually here, go ahead and I'll tell you about this in a second.
Oh, I was just gonna say this has, like, a great it's just a well-rounded flavor, of, I wouldn't call it, like, brown sugar or caramel. To me, it's more like honey, um, like a sweet fruit of some kind, like juicy fruit.
Yeah. And
I
so
don't
I
know if
said
it's
I get cherry pie out of it.
mm, that sounds so good. Now and
I've heard other
yeah,
people say blood orange. I To me, I get just a ton of cherry pie.
yeah, I do definitely get orange out of that for
Mhm.
sure, but it's not a bitter orange. It's a juicy, sweet orange, like, I think tropical, not to have that name
Right, right. Yeah.
influence me.
Right.
And if we did a blind test, I'd be like, "Okay, this is so much smoother and, uh, sweetness rounded." It's is the thing I can think of because like, most bourbon is so heavy on caramel and kinda, like, maybe molasses and those types of things, and I don't get that
Yeah.
out of this. I
No.
get this completely different. Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
No,
What were you gonna
that's what I want that to be the dominant flavor. That's what I want to be. Whatever we're doing on top of that, I want that to be the hero.
Mm.
So
Well, it definitely is. This is excellent. Thank you so much.
you bet. You bet.
What is the next kind of experimental expression that you're working on or will be working on?
Well, I tell you what, I really think that there's something to changing the environment and climate. So I think a climate series where we're aging it. I may have barrels sprinkled around the world at some pretty extreme weather locations to see how they're going to end up. Uh,
Are you thinking like cold weather or yeah, all right. It feels like a little James Bondish to me, like, underwater.
I can't let the cat out of the bag here, but
Yeah.
let me just say that I like to put them in places that I want to go visit.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
That's a great again, it's a barrel's on a vacation, why not join it?
you got it.
Yeah,
You got it. There's a
I
write-off
love it.
in there for me as well, so, yeah, kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
And you get to meet some great people in different locations and have those conversations you were talking about where you can explore and generate some amazing ideas, right? Diversity in thought because of where you are in the world versus just being in Kentucky,
You
right?
bet. Absolutely, absolutely. Makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. If you had a single sentence for a description of your life right now, what would that be?
Well, I've had a saying since I was 15, which was, "I need the miles," which is
You need the what?
miles.
Oh,
So,
need the mic.
it's a great excuse for a road trip or anything. You know, let's go down to, New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I need the miles. So, yeah, let's go check on a barrel in Singapore. I need the miles. So, I would say that would be the one that would just roll off the tip of my tongue. I also like to say I like to earn my bourbon.
Mm.
So, and do some,
Explain that one.
you know, I'll tell you, I had a really good experience with this bourbon not too long ago. I was fishing in Wyoming, 7 hours in the river fishing all day. Unbelievable day, but worn out at the end of it. Sat on this overlooking this kind of horseshoe bend on this river, 500-foot cliff. I felt like we earned the bourbon that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's a great visual of like, uh, it's a perfect way to end the day of like, you're tired, you're exhausted physically, but you have an amazing view and you have sensory, the expression of not just visual, but the flavor and being able to relax.
You bet. You know, last night was another example of it. So, as I said, I was on a flight Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Wednesday and Thursday, I was at 2 different military bases each day, doing tastings, yeah, long days. So, flight gets delayed. I sat at the bar with coworker of mine. It's like, "Oh, we earned this bourbon." 2, 4 long days, but 2 really long days, the last 2. And we were able to sit down and enjoy the hell out of it, kinda recap and just shoot the shit. I was earning our bourbon.
Yeah. I love that. And to me, it reminds me of one, I'm constantly reminded of, which is always say yes. When an opportunity arises, and you're like, "Oh, that doesn't sound that fun," or what, you just always say yes because you never know what will happen. And then if you cap that off with your reward of a bourbon, while at the end of that, it kinda makes for that perfect day. Um, I'm gonna, before we finish up, I'm gonna go into a really quick rapid fire
Yep.
or whatever comes into your mind real quick, all right? Uh, Favorite spot to vacation?
Ooh, probably the ranch at Rock Creek in Montana.
Mm. Favorite sport?
Fly fishing. Those
felt
go
like it.
hand in hand.
I do that. Yeah. Favorite music.
Well, I'm going to Billy Strings tonight, so that might be it. I'd say the best show I've seen in a long time. Saw the Dead at the Sphere in March, which was incredible.
The Sphere. I've never been there. I've had an opportunity and I didn't say yes, and I really regret
Say
that.
yes.
Say
Not
yes.
many things outreach your expectations. That one blew me away.
Favorite movie.
Raising Arizona.
Mm. Best business advice you've received.
You're young and have nothing to lose. Go for it.
And your biggest mistake or lesson learned.
Lots of those. Biggest mistake. Not controlling my own destiny early enough. So when I started buying, when we started having some success, we were kind of a victim of our own success because our competition who was selling to us was like, why are we fueling the fire of our competition? It started cutting me off.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Is it cutthroat down there a little bit?
Yes and no. Yes, when the week that I launched, I got 2 cease and desist letters. There were 8 distilleries, 2 of them sent a cease and desist. They didn't want any competition coming in. Since then, 28 years later, feel like part of the community now, so people will help out. But, when things are going well, people are a little bit more friendly. As times get tough, we'll see what happens.
Oh yeah. Uh, Keep things close when things get tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one more question, which is, I know, especially up here in Oregon, I don't know why there's a lot of gin distillers that are like bootstrapped, from the ground. People kind of like your story of how you started, maybe, but they might be actually distilling in their garage or their basement or something. I know it's tough. Is that something you would recommend people get into right now? Like actually trying from the ground up, starting a distillery, and whatever that answer is, like, why? Like, how do you keep people? What's the motivation you can give people to keep going?
Well, the motivation, you got to have a passion for it. And if you love it, I don't always believe follow your passion because it depends on what you're good at. Your passion, you might be awful at. I might be a passionate guitarist, but I suck at playing the guitar. So don't follow that path, Trey. I talked to Tito Beverage, Tito's Vodka at one time. I said, Trey, I wanted to get into the whiskey business, but I didn't have the money to do it. With whiskey, you got to lay it down, you got to buy the barrels. So making gin is much more accessible. What's not accessible right now is distribution. So in most states, you had 2 big distributors, and there's been so much consolidation. When I started, there were 9 distributors in Kentucky alone. I think there's 3, maybe 4, 2 little ones, but 2 big ones. So a small producer with no money behind it is going to have a damn hard time getting distribution. That being said, if you think you can do it, and it's something you're passionate about, and you're going to work your ass off, yeah, don't look at making money for a long time.
I mean, you're a great example, unfortunately, but also fortunately, because it took you 14 years to be able to really kind of break those chains, right? Like to start seeing those levels of success and being able to own your own destiny at that point, right?
Correct. But that took a lot of capital. That's, you're not out of the woods then. So,
Well, it's a life of entrepreneurship is a life of failure. and
Yeah.
being able to manage that and own that and persevere. So
And so
great. What's that?
and you got to evolve.
Yeah.
I never thought that I would get into the energy drink business or fortified water business, but I had to do that to survive. And yeah, you got to be able to evolve and to, change quicker than, that's one of the things being small is able to pivot so much faster than my competition. So, you got advantages and disadvantages. You got to take advantages of what you have to help propel you.
Move quickly. Yeah.
To me, the biggest mistake you can make is not making a decision.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead and
Right.
fail. You know what's going to happen if you fail? If you fail, then learn from it and change it. But yeah, there's certain risks that are bigger problems than others. But for the most part, if you're making some tweaks or you're doing some things, give it a shot. You can.
That's what I'm hearing.
Tell you.
What I'm hearing you say is the biggest mistake you can make is not making mistakes.
Correct. Yeah, that's where you learn. And
Solid.
And if you don't try something that's out of your lane or out of the categories lane, I ain't gonna have any success. I was just doing another bourbon, like the Beams, the Brown Foreman, the Heaven Hills, Sazeracs of the world. How the hell am I gonna compete with that? They've got the distribution, they've got the marketing, they've got the loyal consumer. You got to do something that's going to push it a little bit. And if you push it, you might find your consumers.
You find the people in your tribe.
You got it.
Trey, thank you so much. It's a great point to end on. I appreciate your time and the opportunity to go through these 3 different expressions. They were absolutely amazing. Anybody that's watching this, I'd highly recommend you go check out Tropics. That was absolutely actually any 3 of these. And my experience out of Jefferson's in general is that they're super fun and interesting to try and taste and experiment. So go get you some. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ask any questions. I'm sure Trey, hopefully you'll be watching. And with that, have an amazing day.
Will do. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.